that song is so cool as well,
It is. We should do like a little in the middle,
Yeah.
come back and fade
Dun,
out. But that
dun,
would require,
dun. Yeah, like they do in the White Horse Inn, because that's
yes,
cool. I like the way they do that.
that would be awesome. But like, I mean, come on now.
You got to pay an editor.
Exactly.
But I just don't want to find out what Dan Hazeltine is up to at the moment. Like, I don't want to know if he's gone woke or anything like that. Like, just tell me he's still solid.
Dan
Still
Hazeltine, that's the guy from
normal.
Jars of Clay, different band.
Different guy. Oh yeah.
Different
So
guy.
yeah, we're doing a different version of the song.
Oh, that's right. This is the Andrew Ossinger one?
No. Close. Keep guessing. Gotta know your own song. Gotta know
William Williams.
No. Keep guessing.
That's the original lyrics.
You sure it's not Dennis?
Jeremy.
Who we got? Come on. Jeremy Casella. Jeremy Casella.
Casella. That's it. Dang it. Yeah.
So he came up with that nice little riff, and yeah, they're also very, very good. Very good. The way that he did that. We should get him down for the conference. Yeah.
And he's still solid.
Oh my goodness. We should actually ask him. I totally forgot. We should have used some money for that. Dang it.
We should have done that.
He would have done it too. That would have been so epic. Now we spent a lot of money on t-shirts. But anyway, so we should probably mention that if you get signed, we'll put the link on this show. Conference is now all getting organized and stuff, so go ahead and get reserved if you're in New Zealand. Obviously, if you're in the States, buy a ticket and fly over, obviously. But get your ticket nevertheless. Or if you just want to reserve a ticket and then get a t-shirt, I suppose that's an option as well, but then you can't. No, that'd be weird. But the first 100 people to register before, when was it? I got instructions about this. I think it was at the end of October, before the end of October, just because the t-shirts have to be made to size and whatnot. Get a free t-shirt. So do that. And the t-shirts are looking good, by the way. They got the nice like conference logo. Good. And one of these guys now, Church, who is a solid dude. I mean, he makes board games, and like he's like one of those like proper pro dudes. Gave it his flair. So it's it's looking good. It's looking pro. We never have anything that looks good or pro, so we got to take advantage of that when we get it. So get into the Eventbrite and have a look, and try to keep the conference prices as low as possible, just to pay for the basics. And anyways, get in. But the venue's not that big, so also don't get stuck and you want to come last minute and then we're full or something like that. I don't know how many people are going to come, but there is that. So with that in mind, we've had a little break. Well, when I say we, I mean Andre. And
he's looking very relaxed.
Everyone else is working. And now we're working together.
Guys, you got to rest. It's very important.
I mean, we're cool with like.
I don't know who taught you in seminary, but this is very important.
I mean, we're all cool with resting,
I'm happy to be in ministry, guys. I mean, it's a good feeling.
There's rest and there's neglect,
It's just bordering on Best Life Now Club,
Listen, a little bit of that, every now and again.
No, we're glad to have you back. So, but we want to press on you and try and keep this, kind of keep it in the realm of cultural mandate and all that. That's the goal. Yeah, we finished the book. We're just gonna sort of float around these topics. We got some ideas and suggestions on the website. So we did see them. I haven't responded yet, but we might well look at some of those things. Eschatological intrusion would be a good one as well. So someone posted about that. But we'll just try and spin it around this topic until conference time, just so it's in our wheelhouse, and then move on from that point. And maybe we'll focus a little bit on the weird and the wonderful with Andre's PhD topic or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And
it's not that weird. I'll tell you what is coming up on my PhD. The next part of it is like Charles Taylor and the whole reenchantment, disenchantment
that'd be good
thing. Yeah, exactly. So
that'd be good. That's always fun. Part of the 2H theme as well. Let's not forget that side of it, which is it's relevant. We want to be thinking about the age to come. We want to be thinking about the upper register, and filtering some of that through Klein. I'll make sure of that. But at the same time, just exploring some of these ideas that are put forward, I think it'd be really good. So I'd love to spend a little time on that, and hopefully that's coming up in the new year, and we'll move on with that. But for this evening for me, or whatever time it is for you, we have in mind a particular article. Nick got hold of this, he loved it, and wants to talk about it. And
Yeah, man.
It's a good article. What you got, Nick?
So this is an article from Themelios, Volume 48, Issue 3, and it's written by a guy called Jeremy Sexton. I probably might have read something of his somewhere else. Don't even know who the guy is, didn't bother to check. But he wrote an article called Postmillennialism, a Biblical Critique. So
Good.
Postmillennialism, a Biblical Critique.
Mm-hmm.
And what I appreciated about the article is he put a little bit of historical context, and then he sort of cherry picked the key verses that are matters of dispute. And so I thought it would be good to have a look at this, because we are not post-mill. We are amillennial, and that is very much shaped by our two-age perspective, in terms of the already but the not yet, and the nature of the way the kingdom is it manifests in the here and now. So I guess one of our key conversation partners is postmillennialism. And it's a hot topic right now, and we're all about hot topics.
It's a current issue. But it is a good point, because in terms of the two-age and the two-age sojourning thing, I mean, eschatologically, this is the antithesis of what we're saying in many ways. You're either in on this two-age deal, or you're kind of not, and that's going to put you on to like culture and everything aside. If you just stick to the eschatology and the hermeneutics involved and the theology that flows out of it, and even the biblical theology that flows into it, that's going to take you in different directions. So it's not a topic that we hit often enough, but it is definitely relevant, and definitely an ongoing important issue, definitely, as it plays into all this other stuff that we've been talking about too, about cultural engagement and whatnot.
I love the opening salvo where he quotes from the Helvetic Confession. Did you see that? We further condemn Jewish dreams.
Yes.
That there will be a golden age on earth before the day of judgment, and that the pious, having subdued all their godless enemies, will possess all the kingdoms of the earth. For evangelical truth in Matthew chapters 24 and 25, and Luke chapter 18, and apostolic teaching in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and 2 Timothy chapter 3 and 4 present something quite different.
Yeah. Amazing. Chapter 11, right? Yeah. I mean, that is
So this is in the Helvetic Confession, right? So how does modern day, this might be, I mean, I don't know if this is, but I've got a few guys in my church who've read The Puritan Hope by Ian Murray.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
Which basically is a kind of review of the postmillennialism.
So Ian Murray is a Jonathan Edwards style postmillennialism revived.
Yeah. Okay. And a couple of the guys are quite excited about it. I'm thinking, how did the Puritans get onto that bandwagon so soon? So soon after these sorts of creeds were written. What happened there? That seems like quite a big shift. Suddenly.
I mean, I don't think it was the dominant narrative. There may have been in any view of a literal millennium was not dispensational in its shape or postmillennial in its shape.
I think Ian Murray argues that the Puritans were mainly post-mill.
Yeah,
not exclusively.
I think that's true, and I think it had largely to do, and he does mention it in the article, to do with that basically positive outlook on the new world and the new shot and everything versus the continent. I think that accounts for a lot of it. But then that didn't go so well, and and then it became less tenable in general, and then it sort of, as he says, waxed and waned, and it's waxed a little bit and then waned again, and then Rushdoony waxed it a little bit and it's waned again, and behold, it waxes once more, and
Yeah, one of the earlier comments that struck me as he was looking at the historical stuff with the revival under Rushduni, is he talks about the Journal of Christian Reconstruction, and there was a journal in 1977, and what interested me are the 5 essays and the 5 authors of those 5 essays. Did you catch the names?
Barnson, Gentry, Chilton.
Norman Shepherd.
Oh, sorry. Are we? Yeah.
Gary North.
Yes.
Greg Barnson, James Jordan, and Rushduni. I mean, okay. So Norman Shepherd,
I know.
condemned for heresy. Gary North, well, he's an economist / theonomist. Greg Barnson, he's we know all about Greg Barnson. James Jordan, he's a Federal Vision guy. And Rushduni, who's the father of them all.
Yeah.
It's like, whew. Yeah, there's the roots of the modern version of postmillennialism, which shouldn't be confused with the Puritan hope and the other versions that have come in the past.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, but I think that they like he does point out some interesting differences. So, for example, they held to there wasn't an amillennial sort of slant, which is kind of, there's a bigger blend, it sounds like, with the modern renaissance of amillennial thinking.
They've listened to some critiques and taken them on board.
Yes, exactly. And so it makes it a slightly more slippery thing to catch, it feels like. And then you've got again, sort of quite I mean, you got Doug Wilson now, who's mentioned as one of the proponents. You've got
Jeff Durbin.
Well, I'm just thinking of this article, but that he deals with the exegesis of Gentry and Matheson,
Marcellus Kick.
Yeah. So anyway, the point I was going to make there was that it is like, it takes on a slightly different flavor. But how do you think it would differ substantially from the Puritan hope? I mean, what sanctifies the Puritan post-millennial sort of thinking versus this one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thoughts about the Puritans right now are probably more in conversation with the pre-mill, which is a lot more Jewish in its orientation. Where there's a temple and there's the nation of Israel more directly. Okay. So my comments were probably more directed at that. But I guess, I mean, I'm reflecting on Robert Murray McShane. I'm reflecting on what I've read in the Puritan Hope. And I guess what the anticipation is that there would be a large return of the Jews. So Romans 11 features in it. And that's the catalyst, which sparks off a worldwide revival, which leads. So it's not so much a theonomic, politically driven program. It's an evangelistic program.
Yes.
As a result of the Jews getting saved, where you're seeing widespread revival. If you think about the 20th century or the 19th century and its fixation on revival, that shape of Lord, pour out your Spirit upon the nation, and very. So there wasn't an American Constitution with Christian roots that they're trying to retrieve, that everyone's getting back to, that's driving the project.
Yeah,
it's very much a revival project.
Yeah, great.
So that for me, I think, is the big difference.
It is a big difference. And the thing is, like, it's almost like you can get behind all of that, because at the end of the day, they're seeing a revival as a result of the sanctifying influence of Christianity, in regeneracy, versus this whole like attempt to do it the wrong way around, almost like capture the culture first, irrespective of whether anyone's regenerate, and
take labels like Christian nationalism, no matter how badly they imply all sorts of stuff.
Yes,
because you want to make a theonomic point as part of your postmillennialism.
Yeah. So so there are some big points of difference, and I think that is definitely worth mentioning. And then as we opened up by saying, you've got the some of the confessions coming out. I mean, you got Calvin's famous statement where he was just like, this is what did he say? I can't remember now, but it's something like, this is complete lunacy or something along those lines, and it just Rushduni and Barnson did not like that. Rushduni especially, I know he sort of he just took offense with Calvin on that point. But anyway, so you have you have these solid blocks of condemnation of what we now are dealing with, and not so much, those other forms of a more positive outlook on the way it all.
I mean, I think just personally, I feel like the more modern theonomic versions of postmillennialism, that's the version that I feel needs a response. We've happily lived as amils, even two kingdoms, with postmillennialism because we have that shared emphasis on evangelism. But the whole church and culture question, where everything's become politicized, it's this new version of postmillennialism which is so politicized, so theonomic in its flavor, that where we would used to let sleeping dogs lie in terms of, we've got our different views on eschatology, but that doesn't really affect how we run the church.
Yes.
This new version does.
It really does.
This new version impacts every issue about, the way that you're a husband, the way that you're homeschooling your family, the way you understand your role in the community and all that other stuff. It's much more highly charged.
Yeah. So what he says in the article is, the article examines the hermeneutical idiosyncrasies and exegetical fallacies displayed in the defenses of postmillennialism. Postmillennialists, and he's thinking about this current one, routinely keep textual details out of focus or interpret them tendentiously. Is that right? Tendentiously. In service of the belief that the prophecies of worldwide righteousness and shalom will reach fulfillment on earth before rather than at the second coming. And he says postmillennialism is unique in affirming that the prophecies of universal righteousness, worship, and shalom will reach fulfillment before Jesus returns. So they take all of these various passages as predictions of the Christianization of the nations, which again kind of gets at this like angle. That's a different way to talk about it than, I suppose ultimately it would end up in a Christianized, a Puritan. It's hard to imagine a Puritan flavor of evangelism where you don't also end up Christianizing the nations, but it's just sort of a different, talk about an important, difference in the road traveled to get there. Great Awakening versus just some sort of Rushdoony theonomy. But anyway.
Yeah.
But but that raises the question about the way that they're interpreting the nations, the ethne.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're tending towards seeing it as discipling sort of groups as a whole, or even geopolitical, like nations as a whole, which does seem to be the way that it kind of goes, you think, well, how is that going to happen? So it's a little bit like, and I can see why this often runs out into Federal Vision stuff, because they've got a similar view about how you would disciple or make disciples of a family. Is you would go to the head of the family, and if you can convert him, you convert the whole family, right? That's the kind of view, because that father would then say, we are now a Christian household and whatever. And so it's hard not to see that sort of vibe, or the language tends to, the way that they interpret ethne. I don't know if they would strictly always use it to describe geopolitical boundaries or nations as such, but the way that the language and the rhetoric tends to go is that's how they kind of see that happening. So even though the emphasis is still on evangelism, the reason it drifts over into this kind of nationalism thing is because how do you evangelize a nation? Well, what we would say is you go for the individuals in the nation, and I think a lot of, they would say that for the most part too, but there seems to be this other element where they would also say that there's a kind of top-down, or it leans towards a kind of top-down evangelizing of a nation, at least when it starts to get into the more theonomic Christian nationalism side of things.
Just listening to Wilson and Durbin, at least, they would definitely say, evangelism, of course. You start with evangelism. Phase one is evangelism. So mere Christendom is maybe a 300-year project.
Yes.
But you start now with evangelism, and maybe down the line, and that's that beautiful idealistic possibility which no one can disprove.
Exactly.
But it's like,
exactly.
So they would agree that it's definitely evangelism up front, but.
Yeah, so you get into some.
Is that what the Great Commission says?
Majority sort of via evangelism, and then once you're able to sort of put in policy via the normal sort of approach of you've got a majority legitimately Christian nation, that's deciding to do something about it, deciding to get into politics and putting some polity and whatnot into play. And then from there, you're back to, what we're thinking right now.
Well, because like even with the Jeff Durbin thing, the way that this seems to play out a lot is with, with the kind of public theology idea.
Yeah.
That it looks like picketing outside abortion clinics because you are there, not simply to evangelize, but to correct public policy, to Christianize it, a little bit. And so I think even there, yes, evangelism. But if evangelism is the route to addressing the nations or to making disciples of the nations, then how you understand the nations is going to determine what that looks like. Because if you are thinking of the nations as a geopolitical group, a patch of land demarcated by geopolitical boundaries, then the way that you disciple that is going to be different if you're thinking of the nations as, say, people groups, or like John Piper does, or say I was talking to a Bible translator friend who's one of the kind of top consultants for Wycliffe Bible translators, and he said the translating the word ethne as nation is one of the most unhelpful things that we've ever done, because it just does not mean that. And he said what he would favor a translation of ethne as just the others. That's all it means, is you're going to the others. So he would go even further than a John Piper, saying it's not geopolitical, it's people groups. And he would go even further and say it's not necessarily people groups, it's just others. It's people who are not us. So you're just going to others to evangelize them. And I think that seems key in this whole discussion.
So one of the strong points of the article is that he just gets down nuts and bolts in terms of exegesis, which is great. It gives you some actual points to have a look at, unlike this discussion, which we will, mull around.
We are pointing you to this great work.
Yeah, exactly.
That we've been impressed with.
So he's done the work. We're just mulling around here trying. So just don't get frustrated. We'll put the link in the thing. You can go and have a look. But we're just doing what we do. So just but the point is that there was one particular section that I thought sort of ruled the day in terms of just like capturing a point that is so concrete. You have to ultimately agree with it or not agree with it, but you can go and open your New Testament and have a look and see what you think. And obviously, if you know a little bit of Greek, this will make some sense. But he says in Matthew 28:19, Jesus uses Isaiah's language of all the nations to mandate the fulfillment of the prophet's missional vision. And the rest of the Great Commission confirms the church's disciple-making mission, like the one described in Isaiah 66:19. It targets persons rather than political units. Immediately after our Lord issues his directive to disciple all the nations, he expands on what he means, baptizing them, teaching them. Okay, so that's the first clue. Them is avtus, or autus, if you prefer the Erasmian. Avtus in modern, which we support here on 2H Sojourner. Avtus is a masculine personal pronoun that refers not to the nations as such, since ethne, nations, is a neuter noun. So this is a key point that it just doesn't get referred to. And
do you want to explain the rule as to why that's a key point?
Well, let me just read this whole thing through.
Okay.
And he explains it well, yeah. But to individuals from the nations. So it refers not to nations as such, since ethne, nations, is a neuter noun, but to individuals from the nations. If the author had wanted to describe the collective conversion of national groups, then he would use avta, the neuter plural pronoun, right, rather than avtus, because that has its antecedent in the sort of masculine personal pronoun. So that I think is a big point, and it's
that's almost concrete.
I can't even imagine what you would say about that. That sort of just ends the discussion as far as I'm concerned in terms of that. Obviously there's some other texts you can look at, but like, what was Jesus telling the people to do? When he issued that commandment. Well, I mean, he was not talking about this neuter sort of nations idea, but he
baptizing the nations, teaching the nations. No, that's not the not the object.
A nation, and that's the key, isn't it? Because when it comes to how you do it, how that is done, it's through baptizing.
Yeah.
And we
well,
know
as
how
Carson
baptism is
says,
done.
The Great Commission is to make disciples of all men everywhere without distinction. A nation qua nation cannot experience the personal discipleship in view any more than it can receive Trinitarian baptism, right? So the whole thing leads in that personal direction.
Yeah.
So, and grammatically, it just is what it is. Now he spells that out even more as you go through the article, but just to kind of get anyone's perhaps you're interested.
That was I was going to ask you about that. I thought that was a very powerful point.
Yeah, definitely. And he's got more of them too. It's not just that one. So let me not it's the whole thing is chock full of this sort of thing. So great article for that reason.
Did you guys ever watch Vikings, the show, the TV show?
Oh, Ragnar. Oh, Ragnar.
Floki. There are moments in that TV series where there is this kind of, I think it happened with what's Ragnar's like brother.
Who ended up being like the French guy, the French
king. Yeah,
exactly.
He became like this French Christian dude, right?
Yeah.
And there were these moments where basically they're saying to him, like, yeah, we'll become allies, but on one condition, you and your people have to become Christians. And so like there was this moment where he accepts on behalf of he's like, right, guys, we're Christians now. So they all get baptized. And I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking, yes, guys, I'm not sure this is gonna work. And even a Rolo,
that's it. Yeah.
And there was this one moment where Rolo even says, I don't feel any different after being baptized. and I don't know, you just kind of, you can see how at moments in Christian history, it went that way because of the politics and the power,
of course, and
the way things went like that. But you can also see from Christian history that was never desirable, never a desirable end. Now, to a post-mill guy who's thinking, of course it's not. Of course you want to do it through individual evangelism. Fair enough, But to the addressing the extremes where it starts to drift into this kind of thing where, I don't know, the kind of father can make the decision for his whole entire household to be baptized, or the king can make the decision for his entire country to be baptized. I mean, I think at that level, we're all acknowledging that what's happening in the Great Commission is just more complicated than saying it's a simple baptize the nation kind of thing. Like you have to teach them, you have to disciple them, they have to become personally converted.
I do think this is where the Baptist perspective on the New Covenant does come into play. Where there's that prophecy in Jeremiah: the father eats grapes, but the son's teeth will be set on edge. That will not be the case with the New Covenant. Where there's going to be that generational corporate aspect where each one will know me. And you see the individualizing aspect that comes into play in the New Covenant. And then when you actually look at the nature of discipleship, come and follow me, take up your cross. You'll be divided against your mother and your father and your wife and the people in your household. There'll be a sword introduced into the household. There's this individualizing aspect which has a bearing on us individually in our individual standing before God. And then you look at how a disciple is, what does discipleship look like in the Gospels? And then what does discipleship look like throughout the book of Acts? It's repent and be baptized. And this
is really important for the whole sojourner thing, like for the exile nature of the church. Like we are exiles, we are sojourning, we're traveling through this world. So when there's no country to be found apart from that heavenly country that we are looking to. And I think the problem with this is it's putting in it, and it is, I mean, in one sense, look, if we're all focused on evangelism and we're all focused on making disciples through ordinary means, like you're just preaching the gospel, you're converting individuals, you're doing church planting, and if you think at the end of the day America's gonna be a Christian country because of that, in one sense, what's the harm? But in another sense, that there is harm to that, because what you're subtly implying to Christians everywhere is that they are looking for a country here and now, pre the return of Christ. And I think that flies against the explicit teaching of what we are to do, that we are looking for a country not here and now. The church is our country here and now. and we're a people in exile, and then our country will come with the king. And I think that is a very different hope. So it changes it from a kind of exile mentality to a kind of conqueror mentality. And I think that is a very, very different mentality, even if at some practical levels, nothing changes. Like, you're still doing evangelism, you're still church planting, you're still baptizing, and it's still, but the mindset is
the mindset. And even, on the same train of thinking, I mean, it's not only the mindset, but it's how one interprets and understands what has in fact happened when it seems we have lost the entire time, So like, we haven't got that land that we were looking for. We were killed at every turn. There was this blood of the martyrs that became the seed of the church. Is that a victory, or is that a loss? And if you're on this conquering mentality, not only does it affect now and the way that you would go about that task, but it affects the way you viewed the entire, as Klein puts it, the work of the Spirit for the last like 2,000 years, basically. And then all of a sudden you're put in this weird predicament where you're interpreting the worst parts of Christianity as the best parts. It's a strange beast.
And how do we interpret the fact that we pretty much had global dominion,
right?
And then we lost
a complete mess. Yeah.
So first of all, we had it and it sucked, and second of all, we lost it, and we've never come anywhere near to getting it back again. No. And then, I mean, and that's without even putting into like, what kind of Christianity will it be?
Well, and if dominion? We don't want, and like, I mean, just think about what it took to get there, though, to get to Christendom at that level. I mean, that was like, bring on the Crusader, full scale war, full scale, I mean, that is, you are really operating on every one of those. You're saying you're ticking the box on all those things that usually are reprobated at this point. It's really it's kind of a scary position at that level. But because we consider that the dark moments of church history that we have to kind of explain when we're evangelizing, and oops, sorry about that. There was a whole lot of people not listening to Jesus. So but now it's almost like that gets exalted as the ideal.
But that again is not to say that we don't also acknowledge that the positive impact of Christendom on the wider world. But it's 100%. Just saying that it was far from the ideal in terms of what we wanted for the church.
I mean, take the parable of the leaven. The leaven leavens the whole lump. I 100% believe that. I believe that leaven will leaven the whole lump, that the gospel will go from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. It does not say that it leavens the lump with political establishments in a theonomic sense.
No.
The gospel does impact every part of the world.
Profoundly says the opposite, because that's what they were expecting, and that's the very reason he told the parable, to get them out of exactly that. I mean, isn't that like ironic? There they are going, well, you had this time bringing the kingdom. I mean, this is their slogan. They're ready to go. They're finally, the political Messiah has arrived. Romans need their butts kicked. We've got a supernatural Messiah. Everything is coming. Everything's happening. And then enter the parables, right? To precisely to show them that is not the way this is going to happen. So it's like really weird when we take those parables and we start making them sound like they support the very thing that was being, adjusted in the thinking of the disciples. I mean, who could deny that?
So just speaking about key proof texts, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 24 to 28.
Yes.
Now, this is the proof text that made Jeff Durbin postmillennial.
Interesting.
So okay. This is the clincher. This is the
destruction happens at the end.
Yeah. So this is the
last enemy to be defeated.
Yeah. So let's, 1 Corinthians 15, 24 to 28. Let me read it, because I think this is worth engaging with, because I've had some recent engagements with a good postmillennial brother, and he thought, from a Jeff Durbin or Gentry perspective of how this is interpreted, that this makes amill or premill or any of the other eschatological perspectives impossible. Postmill is the only true one. So let's read it.
And he's got this article has got another one of those solid exegetical points. We'll come back to that.
Yeah. So verse 24, then comes the end, when he delivers the kingdom to God the Father, after destroying every rule and every authority and power. For he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. For God has put all things in subjection under his feet. But when it says all things are in subjection, it is plain that he is accepted who put all things in subjection under him. When all things are subjected to him, then the Son himself will also be subjected to him who put all things in subjection under him, that God may be all in all. So verses 24 to 26 are the key verses. Verse 26, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. And of course, Doug Wilson says this: in the common assumption shared by many Christians, at the Lord's return, the first enemy to be destroyed is death. But the apostle here says that it is the last enemy to be destroyed. And so this is bringing the post-millennial spin. The Lord will rule from heaven, progressively subduing all his enemies through the power of the gospel brought to the nations by his church. And then, when it would be easy to believe that it just couldn't get any better, the Lord will come and deliver the kingdom. I mean, that is his Father.
Yeah, that's kind of a, like, yeah, he said it. There it is. Now he's in trouble, because that does not fly with this text, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, as this article points out, you know, you have this assumption in all of that there's going to be this kind of ongoing, as he says, inter-advental activity, rather than this one-time event at the end, right? That's the whole big thing.
Yeah.
But you know, as he points out, you've got this whole aorist subjunctive thing at play. The aspect is perfective. You know, it'll turn into a technical conversation now, but it describes effectively an event that will occur as a whole,
yes,
in its entirety from beginning to end. And as he points out, like he's interacting with Gentry. Gentry appears unaware that the tenses, you know, in the subjunctive at least, involve only aspect, not time. This is like a big thing in Greek now, especially. I mean, you know, you read every textbook, it's kind of going to make a big deal out of this. It's like we've come a long way since the 1800s or whenever they didn't believe this. And so, as one Greek grammar states, the subjunctive verbs do not inherently communicate time, and that the indefinite nature of subjunctives usually places the possible action in the future. So, you know, you take all of this and just think about what you just read there. You know, oh, here it is. Paul expects Christ's conquering of all opposition before history ends. And then he says, post-millennialists hear Paul saying in this verse, for he must reign, gradually subduing his foes until all his enemies are under his feet. But the verse actually says that the subduing of all enemies will take place at the culmination of Christ's reign and not before. And there's, you know, you can go on and on here about like driving this home, but I've got, I remember
he does a really good job just really parsing that out.
Let me just quickly read this a little bit, because I think this is just, you know, beautiful. Postmillennialists believe that the great deception will take place right before the second coming.
Yes.
Right, because they have to kind of get around this now. Where do you put that? Accordingly, Jesus will return to an earth that is in decline. When the Son of Man comes, he may not find much faith on the earth.
Yep.
At very least, the earth will be littered with deceived nations. So basically, it's an externalization of this Christianity, which they themselves acknowledge, which will be kind of littered with, you know, this uncountable number of rebels that he must subdue and destroy at his coming. But this doesn't fit with what they've just argued there, that this post-millennial tenet is that Christ will subdue and destroy every rule, right? They're the ones that have just made that argument that, you know, that you have to have this progressive thing until death is the last enemy to be destroyed. And you know, as he says, you recall Wilson's earlier statement that when it would be easy to believe that it just couldn't get any better, the Lord will come. Right? Like he's like actually jammed himself in a real problem there.
Not they want to have their cake and they want to eat it.
Not only on the basis of it not working in the text, but then even on the basis of their own theology, they've like sort of contradicted that 100%.
Because they want to say it's getting better and better and better and better and better and better, and Jesus comes back to a Christianized world of political entities that are Christianized.
Yeah.
But the book of Revelation 20 verse 7 to 10, which is where he's parsing this out, very clearly says that the devil that deceives all the nations essentially turns the world with all of those nations that were so-called Christian against the church.
And so forcefully that not even they can deny that, you know? So he mentions like North and and his very candid kind of like, okay, listen, guys, we have to admit this is the undoing of our position unless we can make this work. And that's true. And yet it's just helpful to see that, like, what do you have to choose something here. Either that verse is real, then what Wilson is saying is not possible. Not to mention the fact that it doesn't work exegetically. But let's just leave that aside, even just logically, anyways.
So just picking up a comment there, because I think this is just really clarifying it. He says, North's refreshing candor on this point is unmatched by any other postmillennialist. But we are left doubting, for example, whether unregenerate lawkeepers satisfy the discipleship envisioned in Matthew 28, and whether a world full of externally upright reprobates would genuinely fulfill the prophecies of Isaiah 11 and Habakkuk 2. Does postmillennialism's optimism go no deeper than culture and covenantal externals? So the way that they respond to the problem of this great apostasy is by saying, well, God has a common grace way of establishing a cultural Christianity,
right,
which will tick the box of the nations being discipled. So cultural
Christianity
is the fulfillment of the Great Commission.
Right, which is not the way they start the argument.
No, they start with evangelism and making disciples.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of a sudden it becomes.
They want to have their cake and eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why articles like this are helpful. It just holds up the full landscape, the full sort of map of the whole argument. Yeah. And then the other thing I suppose we have to talk about is the preterism.
Revelation 19, you have to. The final battle.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of his take on, just how he was, I don't know, I suppose talking about.
Well, before we go into that, I mean, I was just thinking, like, you have to, because the message of a book like Revelation is so strong on this, strong on the fact that the church is going to be a people within the world, distinct, suffering, and yet there is this heavenly perspective that gives you strength to continue and to be willing to go to the end. And so it's in order to hold a post-millennial view, you have to take a preterist view of Revelation,
right?
Because if that in any way is applicable to Christians as a state from now until the return of Christ, that is a big problem, because you cannot square the picture of the church in Revelation with the kind of post-millennial hope. But with a preterist view, you kind of relegate that to the past, and then you can bring principles forward, but the whole state of the church is being the suffering people who are in exile and at odds with the world, and who are persevering in the world. That picture doesn't work anymore. So what can you do but go preterist at that point?
Yeah, true. Yeah, and he brings up, so I mean, yeah, exactly. So you got Jesus coming back to judge and make war, and it's like, on what?
If everything's hunky-dory, why is his robe dipped in blood?
Right.
So one of the key problem texts then for the postmillennial view, the awkward text to try and deal with, is Revelation 19 verse 11 to 21, where we have the Battle of Armageddon, where Jesus is returning on his white horse with the sword coming out of his mouth, and he tramples the nations, and there's the vultures, and there's all the kings of the earth coming together. And so they have one of two approaches they can take. They can take Chilton's idealist interpretation, where he basically says this is just, in battle language, all the terrible things that God does throughout history, and the sword of the mouth is really the evangelizing of the nations. And so in battle idiom, this is really talking about evangelism. And we hold to metaphorical interpretation, but that's super stretched. It's not in keeping with what the rest of the book of Revelation says about the sword. Revelation 2, I think it's 2 verse 16, where the sword is used particularly for judgment. So it's a stretch. He's really stretching it. So Chilton would be probably someone like B.B. Warfield would have held a similar interpretation. So that would be the historic postmillennial interpretation. Doug Wilson sees the weakness of that, and he says, no, it's talking about 70 AD. And so, the world would have to be the land, and the kings, well, he doesn't answer what the kings are. And when he talks about the nations, well, he doesn't actually talk about the nations in the same way in which he talks about the nations in the Great Commission. So, he just sort of soft pedals all the way through that text and just insists that it's a preterist, a pre-70 AD thing.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly unconvincing.
Yeah. And how does he put it in the beginning of the essay? Just sort of, just very, it sort of brings it out of focus. And, whenever it's convenient, it's not, the exegesis is ignored. And, what was interesting as well is, I didn't realize that Wilson actually makes the claim when he says as well, it's, this is one of those passages that enjoys a universal sort of interpretation, in that everyone understands this to be Jerusalem in 70 AD and, when Jesus is coming back. And the irony is it does enjoy a universal, agreement, but that's like not what people have concluded.
But not with Doug Wilson.
Yeah. So it is just funny, when you see it up, how does he get away with this kind of argumentation? But anyway,
either he blew it or he's lying. So
right,
either he said it in ignorance or he's being deceitful.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll extend to him the benefit of the doubt and just say, didn't read enough commentaries on this one.
Maybe that's it. Yeah. But it's helpful to know. It's helpful for people to consider, okay, fine, go with Wilson on this, but just realize that is the case. No, he's not.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
But one thing I did think coming away from reading this article was that it seems to me like a lot of what Doug Wilson is selling that seems to be attractive, that people are buying into, is the coming away from the kind of pre-mill, everything is awful, it's going to get so bad, there's in favor of this kind of optimism, right? In favor of this kind of this optimistic faith about how
activism, selling activism as well.
Yeah, as well. But that it's all going to come good, right? And I think it is important to say that even though we're disagreeing with the kind of conclusions of postmillennialism and its mindset, we do have a shared optimism. It's just about when that optimism is going to be fulfilled and how, right?
And the substance of what to be optimistic about it.
The gospel is good news for the cosmos.
Right. It's good news for the cosmos.
So we're like optimistic.
Christ will be victorious.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, and not a half-baked victory.
Yes. Jesus wins.
Like a complete, total, exactly.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So I think that what postmillennialism is selling, the product doesn't live up to the sales pitch. So the idea is, and to the extent I can understand this, that people are fed up with a kind of a very bleak sort of Christian view of the world, where the world is just awful and you can't see any good in it, and you haven't really been noticing all that Christ has done. You can't see the gospel producing fruit all over the world because you're so fixated on how awful everything is all the time. We've all met kind of older guys in the church who are a bit like this, right? So I can see why it's attractive then to have a view of Christianity that says, hey guys, everything is it's on plan, it's all going well, Christ is going to be victorious, America's going to be great again, this is we're all going well. But the problem is that when you really get down to it, which one actually offers the more positive, which millennial view offers the more positive, upbeat version of our hope? And I think it is that when you get away from this post-mill stuff, or I think post-mill stuff is offering like it'll be great, apart from the fact that most of the countries who are Christianized are just going to be cultural Christians and not actually be Christians, and apart from the fact that actually Jesus is still going to have to come in judgment because there's still going to be a lot of nonsense going on in the world. Exactly. And apart from all these things, it's going to be so great, guys. Whereas actually what we're saying is that it's going to be far better than you can ever imagine, but it's going to be what Christ is going to bring it in.
I had someone saying to me the other day, I think it's a Baptist thing, because I was I forwarded a little video to a group I was involved in where it was critiquing the cultural Christianity that's on the rise. We're seeing a middle right conservative rise, and people are latching onto Christianity. Even Donald Trump, he's talking about Christianity. Don't ask him what his favorite verse is. He doesn't want to get specific, but it's all on the rise. So Russell Brand is being baptized. Even Joe Rogan's supposedly dating Christianity. Jordan Peterson's a Christian,
of course.
And like all these people are suddenly Christians coming out of the woodwork for political and moralistic reasons. And I this video is just simply saying, just remember, guys, this is not the gospel. These people aren't actually Christians. They're not born again. This is just what is expedient for the moment. This is pragmatism. And I had a post-millennial guy respond to me, and he said, Nick, is this a Baptist thing? Is this because you don't like your family to be seen as Christian and your country to be seen as Christian? And I'm like, yes. Baptists believe the church is the church, not our nation is the church or our family is the church. It's the church is the church. And it's
yeah.
And then maybe just one more thing is, I was reflecting on Barneson's comments about the Great Commission. You have that optimistic view that it's the mission that doesn't fail. But if we think about that biblically, let's think about God's plan with Israel, and not everyone in Israel is of Israel. That God has his elect, and Paul's theodicy in Romans 9 is to say that every single one of God's elect was saved. Every single sheep of God will hear the voice of Christ. Not one will be lost. Every single one of them will be raised up on the last day, political systems aside. That's the victory. That's our hope.
And yet, the servant is not greater than the master. Christ, wins by dying on a cross.
Yes.
It appears to be losing, and that's how we win. We blood of the martyrs, seed of the church, so forth. So you end up, with the paradox, which is lost sometimes. It's got to. I mean, otherwise we are saying we're above the master if that paradox doesn't apply to us. And
I rejoice in my weaknesses, that the strength of God may be seen. Until we get a 51% majority, and then we rejoice.
And then we're good. Yeah, then it's all suffering over. Exactly. And then the gospel doesn't bring a sword anymore between families, and it's all that stuff just goes out the window. But as he says, what is the appeal of postmillennialism if it's biblically indefensible? Well, it focuses on this world to which our hearts are naturally drawn, rather than the one to come, which I think is right on the money. It promises triumph in this age, and modern post-millennial movement leaders from Rushdoony to Wilson inspire their followers to fight for that victory, which of course we want to do. That's what this is like a carnal instinct, right? Post-millennialism rejects. It's easy to not turn the other cheek, right? It's easy to just
easy to get angry, to look at the media and look at abortions and the child rape and the transgender stuff. And
of course, I mean, wow. Postmillennialism rejects retreatism and denounces defeatism, offering a more compelling narrative instead. Nevertheless, postmillennialism's this worldly conception of Christ's kingdom lays the theological and spiritual seedbed for one, a cultural warriorism characterized by carnal warfare and worldly stratagems, and number two, the nominal Christianity that the author expects to develop worldwide during the interadvental period that Jesus is going to have to judge at the end anyway.
What I thought when he said that? I thought, so that in the 1980s, when Christendom was at its peak, that was when Jesus could have come.
Whoa. Yeah. And so on that, man, you know what? I'm just kind of remembering as well. Wait, where was it? Let me just quickly see if I can find it here. This, coming back to, I thought this was a great point. I never considered this, but this is so obvious and so no-brainer. They're all, so going back to what we're talking about with the parables and why Jesus is telling them about the parables to begin with, no, it's not going to happen like you think it is. Will you at this time bring in the kingdom, Lord? No, hang on, readjust your mindset, so forth. Well, you get to Acts, and of course, even after the resurrection, this is kind of like the last barrier, right? Because this is, they're expecting this kind of Jewish takeover at that point. And there Jesus answers them. And then, I think you could take from the book of Acts in general, this kind of Jesus is answering them in terms of the spread of the kingdom via the preaching of the gospel. I think you can take it just from that. But, I'd always jumped over what he points out here, that just after that, right? It's almost like you got to give credence. You've got to give the benefit of the doubt to Peter and the apostles for understanding what Jesus was saying at that point, right? As the Spirit falls on them and they begin the mission of the church in obedience to the Great Commission, you've got to kind of give them the edge, right? Is it going to be you and your sophisticated read of Scripture, or them as they were actually doing it? And a short time later, He says, while preaching in Solomon's portico, Peter made explicit that when God sends Israel's Messiah back to earth, the promised restoration of the kingdom will accompany him. That's the answer, right?
Yeah.
Speaking to Jews, Peter proclaimed, repent therefore and turn back, that your sins may be blotted out, that times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord, and that he may send the Messiah appointed for you, Jesus, whom heaven must receive until the times of the restoration of all things, about which God spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets long ago. That's what they all cared about. That was the thing. That's what they had in view. And it's a direct answer to the question, that's all going to happen at the end. Now you have a time, repent, go. This is I think that's a very powerful point.
It is powerful. I mean, it could be either amyl or premill, but definitely not postmill.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Couldn't say it better myself. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and
because it's not everything victory and then the end. It's the end which brings the victory.
Right. It doesn't sort of solve every line of thing, but yeah, exactly. It keeps you. I mean, there he is saying the answer to their question, which I'd never seen before, and I think that's really.
Well, I had this exact same thing when I was talking to a dispensational guy, and he made the point. Look, even in Acts, the disciples are expecting this the kingdom to be given to Israel, to be, and I'm like, that's not the way the book of Acts plays out at all in response to that question. Jesus is like, be quiet, hang on, just wait for the Spirit. That will help you with this. The whole question gets answered, like you say, in the book of Acts.
As he
says, you are my witnesses to the nation, because Israel was going to be established as a witness during.
But you could still sort of interpret that maybe in terms of like this is why it's such a slam dunk for me, because you could sort of take that and go, okay, well, we're going to evangelize and then turn it into the whole post-millennial thing. But this kind of understanding of it precludes, as he says, can post-millennialists identify the holy prophets that Peter had in mind? Which Old Testament prophecies of kingdom restoration will come to fulfillment at Christ's bodily return? Post-millennialism deprives itself of a ready answer, insisting, as it does, that the Old Testament prophecies of a restored kingdom on earth will be fulfilled before the parousia rather than at it, which is exactly what he's saying.
Very powerful point. Yeah.
Very good. And it goes on and sort of like laces it together with other scriptures. So yeah, definitely worth a consideration there. Just on again with the ensemble of exegetical points.
And I think we do need to say, as we come to a close, that we're very open to all sorts of styles of post-millennialism. That's even the pro-revival styles of millennialism, where it's all about getting into prayer meetings and churches pursuing holiness and seeking the face of the Lord and asking God to pour out his Spirit upon the nations. Amen.
Yeah.
And that hasn't got nothing.
Yeah.
That's all in line with the Great Commission as we understand it, and we hold it in common. That there's a new brand of post-millennialism, which is political, which is theonomic, which is cultural warriorish. And that's where the mission of the church is becoming diluted and watered down. And we definitely need to give some pushback on that.
And it's not just the mission of the church. It is also Christian spirituality. It becomes a kind of sanctified worldliness.
Yes, absolutely. And as it ties into the two-age sojourner thing, I mean, I think he says it beautifully when he says, the new creation broke into this world at the resurrection of Jesus. Amen. And it continues to infiltrate the old creation. But the present age will never approach the eternal weight of incomparable glory to be revealed on the last day. Amen. No amount of kingdom expansion or cultural triumphs can narrow the chasm. Spiritual progress only gets us closer to the edge of the precipice, where we can see with greater clarity the immensity of the gulf and the intensity of the splendor on the other side, and where our longing for that incorruptible glory intensifies. Amen.
Keep the glory glorious.
Amen. Give, in the words of Klein, give me some of that pie. So yeah, good. Well, it's nice to have solved the problems there.
Exactly. Done.
No
now
more.
You can send this to all your Doug Wilson fan friends, and they will be fixed. We have fixed it.
That's it. This will fix it. We have the medicine.
We've just been so specific, and
that's right. And meticulous.
No one has thought these thoughts before, but now we have thunked them.
They have been thunked.
And now we can get on with business. All right. Good. Well, don't forget to go and register for the conference if you want to come along.
Get your t-shirt.
It'll be a hoot. Even if we just get to,
and look out for promos on our platforms, which for Mike and I, it's gonna be like Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing. For Nick, it's gonna be his front porch.
So Nick has a platform.
I hand out paper leaflets.
Well, no, Nick will be talking to his homies in Timaru, and you know, and I think your platform is raised there. I mean, I think you do have a platform when you preach on Sunday. You
Yeah, so literally
bring a little bit of that in,
like a foot.
So
I don't push parachurch organizations.
This is the mission of the church. We've just been talking about it. Okay, so just get in there, have a look, share it, and hopefully we'll see you at the conference itself.
Yeah, we'd love to see you at the conference. Yeah,
that'd be good. Have a beer, chill out. All right, good. With that in mind,
over and out.
Here's the jingle.